The blizzard had swallowed the world whole. Clara Bennett could no longer feel her feet. She could no longer feel much of anything, truth be told, except the burning in her lungs and the desperate animal need to keep moving. The snow came at her sideways, sharp as needles against what little skin remained exposed between her bonnet and the collar of her threadbare coat. She had been walking for hours, or maybe days. Time had lost all meaning in this endless white hell. Behind her, somewhere in the howling darkness, was the man she had run from, Silas Whitmore, her husband of 3 days, a man who had seemed so respectable in his letters, so kind in his promises, so desperate for a wife to help him raise his children and warm his bed. He had not mentioned his temper. He had not mentioned the way his eyes went flat and dead right before his hands moved. He had not mentioned that his first wife had died under circumstances the townsfolk refused to discuss. Clara had learned these things quickly enough. The first blow had come on their wedding night. The second came the morning after, when she had failed to have breakfast ready before he woke. The third came when she had dared to cry. She had planned her escape for exactly 48 hours, stealing food when she could, hiding her coat near the back door, waiting for the moment Silas would be drunk enough to sleep deeply, but not so drunk he would forget to lock her in her room. That moment had come 3 nights ago. She had no idea where she was going. North, she thought. Maybe toward the mining camps, where a woman might find work. Maybe toward Canada, where no one would think to look for a runaway bride. Maybe toward nowhere at all. The snow did not care about her destination. It only cared about burying her. Clara stumbled, her boot catching on something hidden beneath the white drifts. She went down hard, her hands sinking into snow up to her elbows. The cold was absolute now, seeping through her gloves, her sleeves, her very bones. Get up, she told herself. Get up or die here. Her body refused to obey. She managed to roll onto her back, staring up at the slate-gray sky. Snowflakes fell on her face, melting against her skin, running down her temples like tears. How strange, she thought, that the sky should weep for her when she had no more tears of her own to spare. She closed her eyes. Just for a moment, she told herself. Just a brief rest, and then she would get up and keep walking. The darkness rose up to claim her, soft as a feather pillow, warm as a lover's embrace. She did not fight it. Clara Bennett was 23 years old, alone in the Montana wilderness, and she was absolutely certain she was going to die. Elijah Thorne had lived in these mountains for 7 years, and in that time he had learned to read the weather like other men read books. He had known this blizzard was coming 2 days before the first flake fell, had felt it in the ache of his bad knee and the particular quality of the wind sweeping down from the peaks. He had spent those 2 days preparing, chopping wood until his arms burned, hunting until his traps were full, stocking his cabin with enough supplies to last until spring, if need be. Now, wrapped in furs and leather, he trudged through the snow toward his most distant trapline. The sensible thing would have been to wait until the storm passed, but Eli had never been particularly sensible, and there was a rabbit in that trap that would make a fine stew if he got to it before the wolves did. Besides, he had grown restless in his cabin. 7 years of solitude had taught him to need the silence of the wilderness, but even silence could grow loud when it was the only voice a man had to keep him company. He was thinking about the rabbit, about how he would prepare it, about whether he had enough wild onions left to flavor the broth, when he saw the shape in the snow. At first, he thought it was a deer, a fallen deer perhaps, brought down by the cold or by predators. But as he drew closer, his heart began to pound in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the effort of walking. It was not a deer, it was a woman. She lay on her back, half buried in a drift, her face pale as the snow around her. Her lips were blue. Her eyelashes were frosted white. She was not moving. Eli dropped to his knees beside her, pulling off his gloves with his teeth. He pressed 2 fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse, and for a terrible moment he felt nothing at all. Then, faint as a whisper, a flutter of life beneath his fingertips. He did not hesitate. He scooped her up in his arms, marveling at how light she was, how fragile. She was small, this woman, barely reaching his chest even if she had been standing. Her coat was thin, her boots were worn, and she had no business being out here in weather like this. Where had she come from? The nearest town was a 3-day ride. The nearest homestead was half that, but even so, she would have had to walk through the worst of the storm to end up here. Questions later, he told himself. Warmth now. He turned back toward his cabin, his long legs eating up the distance. The woman in his arms did not stir. Her head lolled against his shoulder, her breath so shallow he had to keep checking to make sure she was still alive. Hold on, he thought, though he did not say it aloud. He was not a man given to speaking, even to himself. Hold on, little bird. I will not let you die. The cabin appeared through the swirling snow, a solid, dark shape against the endless white. Eli kicked open the door, not bothering to be gentle about it, and carried the woman inside. The fire he had banked before leaving still glowed in the hearth. He laid her down on the bearskin rug before it, then set about building the flames back up, until they roared and crackled, throwing heat and light across the small room. Only then did he turn his full attention to the woman. She was young, 20 maybe, or a few years older. Hard to tell, with her face so drawn and pale. Her hair, what he could see of it beneath her bonnet, was the color of autumn leaves, a deep auburn that caught the firelight and glowed like embers. Her features were delicate, almost fragile, with high cheekbones and a stubborn little chin. She was also, he realized with a twist in his gut, deeply frozen. He had seen frostbite before. He had treated it in himself and in others, back during the war, when men had lost fingers and toes and noses to the bitter Virginia winters. He knew what needed to be done. He also knew how improper it was. There was no one here to judge him, he reminded himself. No one to whisper or point fingers. There was only this woman who would die if he did not act, and himself, who had spent 7 years atoning for sins that had nothing to do with impropriety. He removed her bonnet first, revealing the full glory of that auburn hair, tangled and damp with melted snow. Then her coat, which was so thin he marveled she had survived as long as she had. Her dress beneath was simple wool, grey and practical, with no adornment, save a small cameo pinned at her throat. He left the dress. He could not bring himself to remove it. Not yet. Not unless absolutely necessary. Her boots came off next, and he hissed through his teeth at what he found. Her feet were white, bloodless, the skin waxy and wrong. He cupped them in his hands, willing his warmth into her flesh, rubbing gently to restore circulation. She moaned, the first sound she had made, and he took it as a good sign. He worked on her for what felt like hours, rubbing her hands, her feet, her arms, wrapping her in every blanket and fur he owned, feeding the fire until the cabin was almost unbearably hot. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, color began to return to her cheeks. When he was satisfied that she was no longer in immediate danger of dying, Eli sat back on his heels and studied her face. She was pretty, he decided. Not beautiful in the way of saloon girls or society women, but pretty in a quiet, steady way that spoke of strength and endurance. Who are you, he wondered, and what drove you out into that storm? He did not expect an answer. He settled himself in the chair by the fire, prepared to keep vigil through the night. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but inside, a woman slept and a man watched over her, and neither of them knew that their lives would never be the same. Clara woke to warmth. This was so unexpected that for a long moment she simply lay still, trying to understand. She had been in the snow. She had been dying. She had felt the cold creeping through her, stealing her thoughts, stealing her breath, stealing everything that made her Clara. Now, she was warm. She opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was a ceiling made of rough-hewn logs. The second thing she saw was firelight, dancing across the wood in patterns of gold and orange. The third thing she saw was the largest man she had ever encountered in her life. He sat in a chair by the fire, his legs stretched out before him, his arms crossed over his massive chest. He was watching her with eyes the color of a winter sky, pale blue and startlingly intense against the darkness of his skin and hair. His face was hard, all planes and angles, with a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. His beard was thick and black, touched with grey at the chin. He was terrible. terrifying. Clara tried to scramble backward, but her body refused to cooperate. She was wrapped in so many blankets she could barely move, and her limbs felt weak and distant, like they belonged to someone else. The man did not move. He simply continued to watch her, his expression unreadable. Clara opened her mouth to scream, but what came out was a croak, barely audible even to her own ears. The man rose from his chair. He was even bigger standing, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway. He moved toward her, and Clara's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. He stopped, crouched down, and when he spoke, his voice was low and rough, like gravel sliding over stone. "Easy now," he said. "You are safe here. I will not hurt you." Clara stared at him, unable to form words. Safe. She had not felt safe in so long she had forgotten what the word meant. The man reached toward her, and she flinched. He stopped immediately, his hand hovering in the air between them. "I need to check your feet," he said. "You had frostbite when I found you. Can you move your toes?" Clara blinked. She tried to focus on her feet, on making them move, and after a moment, she felt a twitch, then another, then a small, grateful wave of relief. "Good," the man said. He rose, moving away from her, giving her space. "That is good. The damage was not as bad as I feared." He crossed to a small stove in the corner of the cabin and ladled something from a pot into a tin cup. When he returned, he held it out to her. "Broth," he said. "You need to drink." Clara's hands were shaking as she took the cup. The warmth seeped through the metal into her palms, and she closed her eyes at the simple pleasure of it. She raised the cup to her lips and drank. The broth was rich and savory, flavored with herbs she could not name, and it spread through her like a blessing. When she had drained the cup, she found her voice. "Where am I?" The man took the empty cup from her hands. "My cabin," he said, "in the mountains, about 15 miles from the nearest town." 15 miles. Clara tried to remember how far she had walked, how many days she had been moving, but it all blurred together in a haze of cold and fear and desperation. "I found you in the snow," the man continued. "You were nearly dead. A few more minutes, and you would have been." Clara swallowed hard. "You saved my life." It was not a question, but the man nodded anyway. "I did what anyone would do." No, Clara thought, not anyone. Silas would have left me to die. Silas would have watched me freeze and felt nothing at all. "What is your name?" she asked. The man hesitated, as if the question had caught him off guard. "Elijah," he said at last. "Elijah Thorne. Most people call me Eli." "Eli," Clara repeated. The name felt strange on her tongue, foreign and familiar all at once. "I am Clara. Clara Bennett." She did not say Whitmore. She would never say Whitmore again. Eli nodded, as if storing the name away for safekeeping. "You should rest, Clara Bennett. You have a long way to go before you are well." He turned away, moving back toward his chair by the fire. Clara watched him go, her mind spinning with questions she was too tired to ask. "Eli," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He turned back. "Thank you." Something flickered in those pale blue eyes, something almost like surprise, quickly hidden. He nodded once, curtly, and then he sat down and resumed his vigil. Clara closed her eyes. She was warm. She was alive. She was in the cabin of a stranger who looked like he could crush her with one hand, and yet somehow impossibly she felt safer than she had in months. She slept. Eli did not sleep. He sat in his chair and watched the woman, Clara, as she drifted in and out of consciousness. Every time she stirred, he was there with more broth, more water, more gentle words that felt rusty and strange in his mouth. He was not a man accustomed to gentleness. He was not a man accustomed to much of anything, really, except silence and solitude and the eternal rhythm of survival. But something about this woman made him want to be gentle, something about the way she had flinched when he reached for her, something about the fear in her eyes, the way she had looked at him like he was a monster. He had seen that fear before, in the faces of men on the battlefield, in the faces of people who had heard the stories about him, the things he had done during the war. But this was different. This fear was not about him. This fear was about something else, something that had nothing to do with his scars or his size or his reputation. Someone had hurt this woman. Someone had hurt her badly enough that she would rather walk into a blizzard than stay wherever she had been. The thought made Eli's hands curl into fists. He did not know her story. He did not know who she was running from or why. But he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he would not let anyone hurt her again, not while she was under his roof, not while she was in his care. He watched her sleep, this fragile, fierce little bird who had nearly frozen to death in his mountains, and he made a silent vow. "You are safe now, Clara Bennett. Whatever you are running from will have to go through me to reach you." And Elijah Thorne was not an easy man to get through. Clara woke again to daylight streaming through a small window. The fire had died down to embers, but the cabin was still warm, heated by some lingering magic she did not understand. She sat up slowly, testing her body. Her feet ached, a dull throb that spoke of healing rather than damage. Her hands were stiff but functional. Her head felt clearer than it had since she had left Silas's house. The cabin was empty. Clara looked around, taking in her surroundings for the first time. It was a small space, but neat and well organized. A bed in one corner, covered with furs, a table and 2 chairs, a stove, a row of shelves lined with jars and tins, a rack of tools and weapons by the door. Everything spoke of a man who lived alone. Everything spoke of a man who expected no visitors. Clara pushed back the blankets and swung her legs over the edge of the makeshift bed she had been lying on. Her feet touched the floor, and she winced at the cold, then noticed the thick woolen socks someone had put on her while she slept. Eli. His name was Eli. She stood carefully, holding onto the chair for balance. Her legs were weak, but they held. She took a tentative step, then another, making her way toward the window. Outside, the world was white. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of impossible beauty, all rolling drifts and crystalline trees, and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and rose. Clara had never seen anything so beautiful. She had also never felt so utterly alone. The door opened behind her, and she spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Eli stood in the doorway, a load of firewood in his arms. He was covered in snow, his beard frosted white, his pale eyes bright with cold. He looked, Clara thought, like some kind of winter spirit, a creature born of ice and stone. He stopped when he saw her standing, something like surprise flickering across his hard features. "You should not be up," he said. "I am fine," Clara replied, though her voice wavered slightly. Eli grunted, which seemed to be his primary form of communication. He crossed to the stove and deposited the wood in a neat pile, then turned to build up the fire. Clara watched him work, noting the easy economy of his movements, the way his large hands handled the wood with surprising delicacy. "Hungry?" he asked, without turning around. Clara realized, with some surprise, that she was. "Yes," he nodded, and reached for a pan on one of the shelves. Within minutes, the smell of frying bacon filled the cabin, and Clara's stomach growled loudly enough to be embarrassing. Eli did not comment. He simply cooked, moving with the same quiet efficiency he seemed to bring to everything, and when he was done, he set a plate on the table and pulled out a chair. "Sit," he said. "Eat." Clara sat. She ate. The food was simple but good. Bacon and biscuits and some kind of preserved fruit she did not recognize, and she cleaned her plate without speaking. When she was done, Eli took the plate away and replaced it with a cup of coffee. Then he sat down across from her, his bulk somehow making the chair look like it belonged to a child. For a long moment neither of them spoke. "Thank you," Clara said at last, "for the food, for everything." Eli nodded. His eyes never left her face, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see straight through her, that he knew every secret she had ever kept. "Who are you running from?" he asked. The question was blunt, direct, completely without pretense. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "I do not know what you mean," she said. Eli did not blink. "You walked into a blizzard in a coat too thin to stop a summer breeze. You have no supplies, no horse, no provisions. You were heading north toward nothing but wilderness and death." He paused. "Someone was chasing you, someone bad enough that you would rather die than let them catch you." Clara opened her mouth to deny it, but the words would not come. She stared at Eli, at his scarred face and steady eyes, and something inside her crumbled. "My husband," she whispered. "I was running from my husband." The word husband felt like poison on her tongue. She had been married to Silas for 3 days. She had been his prisoner for all of them. Eli's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes, something cold and hard and dangerous. "Did he hurt you?" Clara looked down at her hands, clasped in her lap. She thought about the bruises on her ribs, hidden beneath her dress. She thought about the finger-shaped marks on her arms, already fading to yellow. She thought about the way Silas had smiled when he hit her, like it brought him pleasure, like she was nothing more than a thing to be broken. "Yes," she said, "he hurt me." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. When Clara finally looked up, she found Eli watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "He will not hurt you again," Eli said. His voice was quiet, but there was something beneath the quietness, something vast and implacable. "Not while you are here. Not while you are under my protection." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. She had cried so much in the past week that she thought she had no tears left, but here they were, threatening to spill over. "You do not even know me," she said. "Why would you protect me?" Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he rose from the table and turned away, moving toward the window. "Because someone should," he said. "Because everyone deserves to be safe." Clara stared at his broad back, at the way the light caught the silver in his hair, and she felt something shift inside her chest, something small and fragile and new. "How long can I stay?" she asked. Eli turned back to face her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were warm. "As long as you need," he said. "The storm has blocked the passes. It will be weeks before anyone can travel. You are stuck here, Clara Bennett." He paused, and something that might have been a smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. "You are mine now." The words should have terrified her. Coming from any other man, they would have. But looking at Eli, at his scarred face and gentle eyes, Clara felt only relief. She was stuck in a cabin in the mountains with a stranger who looked like he could tear a man apart with his bare hands. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Eli rose before dawn each morning, building up the fire and preparing breakfast while Clara slept. He would eat quickly, then head out to check his trap lines or gather firewood, leaving Clara alone in the cabin with nothing but her thoughts for company. At first, the solitude was welcome. Clara had spent so much of her life surrounded by people, first in the orphanage where she had grown up, then in the series of jobs she had held as a maid and cook, then in Silas's house with his demanding children and his cruel eyes. To have silence, true silence, was a gift she had not known she craved. But as the days passed, she found herself growing restless. Her strength was returning. Her feet no longer ached, and the bruises on her body were fading to nothing. She could walk without trembling, could stand without support, could move through the cabin without feeling like she might collapse at any moment. She needed something to do. On the 5th day, while Eli was out checking his traps, Clara decided to make herself useful. She started with the dishes, washing and drying the tin plates and cups that had accumulated in the basin. Then she swept the floor, beating the dust from the bearskin rug until her arms ached. She organized the shelves, wiping down the jars and tins, arranging them in neat rows by size and content. When Eli returned that evening, he stopped in the doorway and stared. "What happened?" he asked. Clara felt a flutter of nervousness. Perhaps she had overstepped. Perhaps he did not want her touching his things. "I cleaned," she said. "I hope you do not mind. I needed something to do, and I thought—" She trailed off, uncertain. Eli was silent for a long moment. Then he stepped inside and closed the door behind him, shaking the snow from his coat. "It looks good," he said. His voice was gruff, but there was something beneath the gruffness that sounded almost pleased. "It has been a long time since anyone cleaned this place. I had forgotten what the floor looked like without a layer of dirt." Clara let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "I can do more," she said. "I can cook if you have the supplies. I was a cook before She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Eli nodded slowly. "There are supplies in the root cellar," he said. "Potatoes, carrots, onions, some dried meat, flour and salt." He paused. "I am not much of a cook myself. I would not say no to something other than stew and biscuits." Clara felt a smile tug at her lips. It was a strange sensation, smiling. She had almost forgotten how. "I will see what I can do," she said. That night she made a proper meal for the first time in weeks. Roasted potatoes with herbs she found in small jars on the shelf. Carrots cooked in butter until they were soft and sweet. Bread, fresh from the oven, still warm and fragrant. Eli ate 2 helpings without speaking. When he was done, he looked at her across the table, and there was something in his eyes that made Clara's breath catch. "That was the best meal I've had in years," he said. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It was nothing special," she said, "just simple food. Simple food cooked with care." Eli replied, "There is nothing more special than that." He rose from the table, collecting the dishes before Clara could protest. He washed them himself, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate work, and Clara watched him with a feeling she could not quite name. This man, this giant, scarred stranger who had pulled her from the snow and saved her life, was nothing like what she had expected. He was nothing like Silas, with his smooth words and hidden cruelty. He was nothing like the men she had known in the orphanage, who had looked at the girls like they were cattle to be sold. Eli was quiet and gruff, and sometimes frightening to look at, but there was a gentleness in him that Clara was only beginning to understand. And she was beginning to realize that she wanted to understand more. Winter deepened around them. The snow piled higher and higher against the cabin walls, until it seemed like they were buried in a world of white. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, and the cold became a living presence, pressing against the windows like a hungry animal. Clara learned the rhythms of the cabin. She learned that Eli rose with the sun and worked until dark, that he spoke little but listened much, that he had a habit of humming to himself when he thought she was not paying attention. She learned that he liked his coffee strong and his meals hot, that he preferred silence to small talk, that he had a deep, rumbling laugh he rarely let loose, but that transformed his face when he did. She also learned his history bit by bit, like pulling threads from a tightly woven cloth. It happened one evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival. They had eaten dinner, a stew Clara had made from rabbit and root vegetables, and they were sitting by the fire, watching the flames dance. "Where did you get that scar?" Clara asked. The question slipped out before she could stop it. She had been wondering since the first moment she saw him, but she had not dared to ask until now. Eli was silent for so long that Clara thought he would not answer. Then he reached up and touched the raised line of flesh that ran from his temple to his jaw, his fingers tracing the path like a memory. "The war," he said. "A Confederate saber. I was lucky it did not take my eye." Clara felt her heart clench. She had known, of course, that he was a soldier. He had the bearing of one, the discipline, the way he moved like he was always ready for an attack. But knowing it in her head and hearing it from his lips were different things. "You fought for the Union?" she asked. Eli nodded. 3 years. "I enlisted when I was 18. I thought I was going to save the country." He paused, his eyes distant. "I did not know what war really was." Clara waited, sensing there was more. "I did things," Eli continued, his voice rough. "Things I am not proud of. Things that haunt me still." He looked at her then, his pale eyes bright with something that might have been pain or shame or both. "When the war ended, I could not go back. Could not face my family, my town, the people who remembered the boy I had been. So I came here, to the mountains, to forget." Clara thought about that, about a young man, barely more than a boy, going off to fight for something he believed in and coming back broken, about running from the past, from the person you used to be, from the things you had done that you could not undo. She understood that. She understood it better than she had ever understood anything. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Coming here? Being alone?" Eli was quiet for a moment, then he shook his head. "I did at first," he said. "I missed people. I missed conversation and laughter, and the simple pleasure of another person's company. But then I got used to it. The silence became a comfort instead of a curse. The solitude became a shield instead of a prison." He paused. "I thought I did not need anyone anymore." The word "thought" hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Clara felt her pulse quicken. She looked at Eli, at his hard face and gentle eyes, and she saw something she had not expected to see. Loneliness. The same loneliness she had carried for as long as she could remember. "I understand," she said softly. "I know what it is like to be alone, even when you are surrounded by people. I know what it is like to build walls so high that no one can reach you." Eli met her eyes. The firelight flickered between them, casting dancing shadows across his scarred face. "How did you end up married to a man who would hurt you?" he asked. It was Clara's turn to be silent. She had not spoken about Silas since that first morning, had not wanted to give him space in her new life, but something about the intimacy of this moment, the warmth of the fire and the depth of Eli's gaze, made her want to tell him. "I was a mail-order bride," she said. "I answered an advertisement in a newspaper. A rancher in Montana looking for a wife to help him raise his children and manage his household." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. He seemed so kind in his letters, so desperate and lonely and good. I thought I had finally found a chance at the life I had always wanted. A home, a family, a place where I belonged. But he was not kind, Eli said. It was not a question. No, Clara's voice was barely a whisper. He was not kind. The first night after the ceremony, he came to my room. He had been drinking. I could smell it on his breath, could see it in the way his eyes went flat and cold. She shuddered at the memory. He told me that I was his property now, that I would do as he said, when he said, without question or complaint, and when I tried to protest, she could not finish the sentence, but she did not need to. Eli's hands had curled into fists on the arms of his chair. His jaw was tight, the muscles jumping beneath his beard. "If I ever meet this man," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "I will kill him." Clara looked at him, startled by the violence in his words. But when she saw his face, she understood. He was not threatening. He was promising. "He does not matter anymore," she said. "I am here now. I am safe." Eli's eyes softened. The tension drained from his shoulders, and he unclenched his fists. "Yes," he said, "you are safe." They sat in silence for a long time after that, watching the fire burn. Two lonely souls finding comfort in each other's presence. And Clara thought, for the first time in her life, that maybe she did not have to be alone anymore. 3 weeks passed. The snow showed no signs of melting. If anything, it grew deeper, the drifts piling higher than Clara's head in some places. Eli said the passes would not be clear until spring, that they were well and truly trapped until then. Clara found she did not mind. She had fallen into a routine that felt against all odds like home. She cooked and cleaned, tending to the cabin while Eli was out checking his traps. She mended his clothes, which were in a sorry state after years of bachelor neglect. She organized his supplies, made lists of things they would need when the passes finally cleared. And in the evenings, they talked. Eli told her about his childhood in Pennsylvania, about his mother who had died young, and his father who had never recovered from the loss. He told her about his brothers, who had also gone to war and who had also come back changed. He told her about the decision to come west, to leave everything behind and start over in a place where no one knew his name. Clara told him about the orphanage, about the cold rooms and colder caretakers, about the nights she had spent dreaming of a family that would never come. She told him about her years as a servant, moving from house to house, never belonging anywhere. She told him about the hope she had felt when she had answered Silas's advertisement, and the despair that had followed. With each story shared, the walls between them crumbled a little more. Clara began to notice things she had not noticed before. The way Eli's eyes crinkled at the corners when he was amused, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, the way he always made sure she had the best portion of food, the warmest seat by the fire, the thickest blankets at night. She also began to notice the way her heart raced when he was near, the way her skin tingled when his hand accidentally brushed hers, the way she found herself looking for excuses to be close to him, to hear his voice, to see his rare and beautiful smile. She was falling for him. The realization hit her one evening as she watched him chop wood outside the cabin. He had removed his coat despite the cold, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. Sweat glistened on his brow, and his breath came in white puffs that hung in the frozen air. He was magnificent, and she was falling for him. Clara pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the wild flutter of her heart. This was madness. She barely knew this man. She was still technically married to another. She had no business feeling anything for anyone, let alone a scarred mountain man who lived alone in the wilderness. But the heart did not care about logic. The heart wanted what it wanted. And Clara's heart wanted Elijah Thorne. Eli was not blind. He saw the way Clara looked at him when she thought he was not paying attention. He saw the flush that crept up her cheeks when their hands touched. He saw the way she leaned toward him when they sat by the fire, like a flower seeking the sun. He knew what it meant. and it terrified him. He had not wanted a woman in years, not since before the war, when he had been young and foolish and full of dreams. The things he had seen, the things he had done, had burned those desires out of him, leaving nothing but ash and emptiness, or so he had thought. Clara had changed everything. From the moment he had found her in the snow, something had shifted inside him. A door he had locked long ago had creaked open, letting in light he had thought he would never see again. He wanted her, not just her body, though he wanted that too with an intensity that frightened him. He wanted her laughter and her tears, her strength and her vulnerability, her past and her future. He wanted all of her. But he did not deserve her. He was a killer, a monster, a man who had done things that would haunt him until the day he died. Clara deserved someone better, someone clean and whole, someone who could give her the life she had always dreamed of. Not a broken soldier hiding in the mountains, not a scarred beast who had forgotten how to be human. He tried to keep his distance. He stayed out later, checking traps that did not need checking, gathering wood they did not need. He spoke less, smiled less, touched her less. But the cabin was small, and Clara was everywhere. Her scent like lavender and fresh bread. Her laughter, rare but precious. Her eyes warm and brown and full of things he was afraid to name. He was losing the battle, and he did not know how much longer he could hold out. It happened on a Thursday. Clara was standing by the stove, stirring a pot of stew, when Eli came through the door. He was covered in snow, his face red with cold, and he was holding something in his hands. "Close your eyes," he said. Clara blinked at him. "What? Close your eyes," he repeated. "I have something for you." Clara felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. She closed her eyes obediently, waiting. She heard Eli cross the cabin, felt him stop in front of her. Then something soft and warm was draped around her shoulders. "Open them," he said. Clara opened her eyes and looked down. Wrapped around her was a shawl, made of the softest wool she had ever felt, dyed a deep, rich red that glowed like rubies in the firelight. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Eli." "I made it," he said, his voice gruff with embarrassment. "From the wool of the sheep I traded for last fall. It took me a while. The dyeing was harder than I expected." He paused. "I thought you might be cold." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever made her anything before. No one had ever cared enough to try. "It is beautiful," she said. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever owned." She looked up at Eli, at his scarred face and uncertain eyes, and something inside her broke. Before she could think, before she could talk herself out of it, she reached up and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, barely more than a brush of skin against skin, but the effect was electric. Eli went rigid beneath her touch. For a terrible moment, Clara thought she had made a mistake, that she had misread the signs, that he did not want her at all. Then his hands came up to cup her face, and he kissed her back. It was not soft, it was not tentative. It was deep and fierce and hungry. A kiss that spoke of years of loneliness and longing, a kiss that claimed her as surely as any words could. Clara melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body pressing against his. She could feel the heat of him through their clothes, could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her chest. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for breath, Eli rested his forehead against hers. "Clara," he said, his voice rough, "I should not have done that." "Yes, you should have," Clara replied. "I wanted you to. I have wanted you to for weeks." Eli closed his eyes. "You do not know what you are saying. You do not know what I am." "I know exactly what you are," Clara said. "You are a good man, a kind man, a man who saved my life and asked for nothing in return." She reached up and touched the scar on his face, tracing it with gentle fingers. "You are the man I want." Eli's eyes opened. They were bright with something that might have been hope or fear or both. "I'm not good," he said. "I have done terrible things, things that would make you run if you knew." "Then tell me," Clara said. "Tell me everything, and let me decide for myself." They stood there for a long moment, locked in each other's arms, the fire crackling behind them, and the snow falling silently outside. Then Eli took a deep breath and began to talk. He told her everything. He told her about the battles, the blood, the screaming. He told her about the men he had killed, some in the heat of combat, others in cold necessity. He told her about the village they had burned, the families they had displaced, the lives they had destroyed in the name of a cause he had believed was just. He told her about the nightmares that still woke him in the dead of night, about the faces that haunted him, the voices that whispered in the darkness, about the guilt that sat on his chest like a stone, crushing him slowly, inexorably, year after year. He told her the worst of himself, the darkest corners of his soul, the things he had never spoken aloud to another living person, and when he was done, he waited for her to run. She did not run. Instead, she took his hands in hers and held them tight. "You were a boy," she said, "a boy sent to do a man's job in impossible circumstances. The things you did were terrible, yes, but you did not do them out of cruelty. You did them because you were ordered to, because you thought it was right, because you were trying to survive." "That does not excuse it," Eli said. His voice was raw, broken. "No," Clara agreed, "it does not excuse it, but it explains it, and it tells me something important about who you are." Eli looked at her, confusion in his eyes. "It tells me that you have a conscience," Clara said, "that you feel remorse, that you have spent 7 years punishing yourself for things that happened in a war you did not start." She squeezed his hands. "You are not a monster, Eli. You are a man. A flawed, complicated, wonderful man who has been carrying a burden too heavy for anyone to bear alone." Eli felt something crack inside his chest, something that had been frozen for so long he had forgotten it was there. "How can you say that?" he whispered. "How can you know what I have done and still look at me like that?" Clara smiled, soft and sad and beautiful. "Because I know what it is like to be judged for your past," she said. "I know what it is like to be seen as something less than human, something unworthy of love or kindness or grace." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "You saved my life, Eli. You took me in when you had no reason to. You fed me and sheltered me and kept me safe. Whatever you were in the war, that is not who you are now." Eli stared at her. This small, fierce woman who had walked into a blizzard rather than submit to a cruel man, who had survived against all odds, who was looking at him like he was something precious rather than something broken. "I do not deserve you," he said. "Maybe not," Clara replied, "but you have me anyway." And then she kissed him again, and Eli stopped thinking about what he deserved. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. She and Eli did not speak of what they were to each other. There was no need for words when their actions said everything. They moved through the cabin like two halves of a whole, anticipating each other's needs, fitting together in ways that felt almost magical. They slept in the same bed now, wrapped in furs and each other, keeping the cold at bay with shared warmth. Eli held her like she was something precious, something fragile, and Clara had never felt so cherished. During the days they worked side by side, Eli taught her how to check the trap lines, how to skin and prepare the animals they caught. Clara taught him how to cook meals that were more than just sustenance, how to find joy in the small pleasures of a well-made meal. At night they sat by the fire and talked for hours, about their pasts, their hopes, their fears, about the future that stretched before them, uncertain but somehow less frightening because they would face it together. "What will happen when the pass is clear?" Clara asked one night. They were lying in bed, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the cabin in soft shadows. Eli was silent for a moment, then he tightened his arm around her. "I do not know," he admitted. "I have not thought that far ahead." Clara traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. "I am still married," she said to Silas. "In the eyes of the law, I am his wife." Eli's body tensed. "You will not go back to him." "No," Clara agreed. "I would rather die than go back to him. But that does not change the fact that I am bound to him, that leaving him was illegal, that if he finds me—" She could not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Eli rolled onto his side, cupping her face in his hands. His eyes were fierce in the firelight. "Listen to me," he said. "I do not care what the law says. I do not care what that man thinks he owns. You are not his. You are not anyone's. You are your own person, Clara Bennett, and you have the right to choose your own life. Clara felt tears burn in her eyes. And if I choose you, she whispered. Something shifted in Eli's expression, something raw and vulnerable and desperately hopeful. Then I would be the luckiest man alive, he said. Clara kissed him then, pouring all her feelings into the touch of her lips against his. And when they broke apart, both breathless and trembling, she said the words she had been afraid to speak. I love you, Eli. The silence stretched between them, heavy with meaning. Clara felt her heart pound as she waited for his response. Then Eli smiled, that rare and beautiful smile that transformed his whole face. I love you too, he said. I have loved you since I found you in the snow. I have loved you every moment since. Clara laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her. We are fools, she said. Both of us. Yes, Eli agreed, but at least we are fools together. They held each other through the night, and for the first time in her life, Clara did not dream of running. She had found her home. Spring came slowly to the mountains. First, there was the dripping, water running from the eaves of the cabin, trickling down in silver streams. Then the snow began to shrink, revealing patches of brown earth and stubborn green growth. The days grew longer, the sun stronger, and the world began to wake from its long winter sleep. Clara watched the thaw with mixed emotions. She was glad for the warmer weather, for the fresh food that would soon be available, for the end of the long months of isolation. But she was also afraid. The passes would be clear soon. People would be able to travel again. And that meant that Silas might come looking for her. She had not forgotten him. How could she? He haunted her dreams, his flat eyes and cruel smile lurking in the shadows of her mind. She had escaped him once, but she knew he would not give up easily. A man like Silas did not accept defeat. A man like Silas would hunt her to the ends of the earth. Eli sensed her fear. Of course he did. He could read her like a book now, after months of living in each other's pockets. Tell me what is wrong, he said one evening. They were sitting on a makeshift bench outside the cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. The air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of melting snow and new growth. Clara leaned against his shoulder, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I am afraid, she admitted, of what happens next, of Silas, of everything. Eli's arm came around her, pulling her close. I told you before, he said. I will not let anyone hurt you, not while I draw breath. I know, Clara said, but what if he comes with men? What if he comes with the law? You cannot fight the whole world, Eli. Eli was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to face her, his pale eyes serious. I have been thinking, he said, about the future, about us. Clara's heart skipped a beat. And there is a town about a week's ride from here, Eli said. A proper town with a church and a sheriff and people who mind their own business. He paused, as if gathering his courage. I thought maybe, if you wanted, we could go there, get married, make it legal. Clara stared at him. But I am already married. You were married under false pretenses, Eli said, to a man who lied about who he was and what he intended. There are judges who will grant an annulment for that. There are ways to undo what was done. Hope flickered in Clara's chest, tentative and fragile. You would do that? She asked. You would take me to town, stand before a judge, face all the questions and complications? Eli took her hands in his. I would walk through fire for you, Clara Bennett, he said. What is a little paperwork compared to that? Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks, happy tears for once. Tears of relief and joy and overwhelming love. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, to all of it. Eli's face broke into that rare, beautiful smile. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, there on the bench, with the mountains watching and the sunset blazing overhead. And Clara thought that maybe, just maybe, she was going to get her happy ending after all. They set out a week later. Eli had spent the time preparing. He packed supplies, checked the trail, made sure the cabin was secure for their absence. Clara had packed too, gathering the few belongings she had accumulated during her months in the mountains, including the red shawl that never left her shoulders. The journey was long, but not difficult. Spring had settled over the land, bringing green grass and blooming flowers and streams that ran swift and clear. Clara rode behind Eli on his big bay horse, her arms wrapped around his waist, her cheek pressed against his back. She had never felt so free. They reached the town on the 6th day. It was a modest place, just a handful of buildings clustered around a dusty main street. But to Clara, it looked like a promised land. Eli led them to the general store first, where he traded some furs for supplies. The shopkeeper, a round woman with kind eyes, looked at Clara with open curiosity but asked no questions. "New wife," she said to Eli. Eli glanced at Clara, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Soon," he said, "very soon." They found a room at the boarding house, small but clean, with a real bed and real sheets, and a window that looked out over the street. Clara stood at that window for a long time, watching the people come and go, marveling at how ordinary it all seemed. She had almost forgotten what normal life looked like. The next morning, Eli went to see the judge. Clara waited at the boarding house, pacing the small room, her nerves stretched tight as a bowstring. He was gone for hours. By the time he returned, Clara had convinced herself that something had gone wrong, that the judge had refused, that Silas had somehow found them and ruined everything. But when Eli opened the door, he was smiling. "It is done," he said. "The judge reviewed your case. Given the circumstances, given the fraud and the violence, he has granted you an annulment. You are no longer married to Silas Whitmore." Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She sat down heavily on the bed, her hands shaking. "Just like that," she whispered. Eli sat down beside her, taking her hands in his. "Just like that," he confirmed. "You are free, Clara, legally and completely free." Clara burst into tears. She had not realized how heavily the weight of that marriage had pressed on her, even after months of escape. To have it lifted, to be truly free, was almost more than she could bear. Eli held her while she cried, stroking her hair, murmuring soft words of comfort. When the tears finally stopped, he pulled back and looked into her eyes. "There is one more thing," he said, "if you are willing." Clara wiped her face with the back of her hand. "What thing?" Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. A ring, Clara realized. A simple band of gold, worn smooth with age. "This was my mother's," Eli said. "She gave it to me before she died. She said I should save it for someone special." He paused, his voice rough with emotion. "I never thought I would find someone worthy of it. Not until you." Clara stared at the ring, her heart pounding. "Eli, marry me, Clara." His voice was steady, but she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "Not because the law says so. Not because you have nowhere else to go. Marry me because I love you, because I want to spend the rest of my life with you, because you are the best thing that has ever happened to me." Clara took the ring from his hand. It was warm from his skin, solid and real and perfect. "Yes," she said, 1,000 times yes. Eli's face broke into that smile she loved so much. He took the ring back and slid it onto her finger, where it fit like it had been made for her, and then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. They were married 3 days later. The ceremony was small, just the two of them, and the preacher and his wife as witnesses. Clara wore a new dress, simple blue cotton that Eli had bought for her from the general store. Eli wore his cleanest shirt and had trimmed his beard for the occasion. They stood before the altar in the tiny church, holding hands, and spoke the words that bound them together. "Do you, Elijah Thorne, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was strong and sure. "Do you, Clara Bennett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." She had never meant anything more. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife." Eli kissed her, there in that little church, with the sunlight streaming through the windows and the future stretching bright before them. Clara Thorne, that was her name now, and she would never be Clara Whitmore again. They stayed in town for a few more days, enjoying the novelty of civilization before returning to their mountain home. Clara bought seeds for a garden, cloth for new curtains, books to pass the long winter nights. Eli bought a second horse, a gentle mare that Clara could ride on her own. On their last night in town, they sat in the dining room of the boarding house, eating a meal neither of them had to cook. "Are you happy?" Eli asked. Clara reached across the table and took his hand. "I have never been happier in my life," she said. "You have given me everything I ever wanted, a home, a family, someone to love who loves me back." She squeezed his fingers. I did not think it was possible after everything that happened. I thought I was destined to be alone forever. Eli turned her hand over and pressed a kiss to her palm. You will never be alone again, he said. I swear it. Clara smiled, her heart full to bursting. I know, she said. I believe you. They finished their meal and walked back to the boarding house hand in hand. Tomorrow they would begin the journey back to the cabin, back to their life, their routines, their shared solitude. But tonight they had each other, and that was more than enough. The ride back to the mountains was different from the journey to town. Before, Clara had been nervous, uncertain, afraid of what the future might hold. Now, riding beside Eli on her new mare, she felt nothing but joy. The world was beautiful. The mountains rose around them, majestic and eternal. The sky was a brilliant blue, dotted with fluffy white clouds. The air smelled of pine and wildflowers and the promise of summer. They stopped at midday to rest by a stream. Clara dipped her feet in the cold water, while Eli tended to the horses. I have been thinking, Clara said. Eli glanced at her, a smile tugging at his lips. That sounds dangerous. Clara threw a pebble at him, missing by a wide margin. I am serious. I have been thinking about the future, about what we might build together. Eli sat down beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. What do you mean? Clara took a deep breath. The cabin is wonderful, but it is small. And if we are going to have a family, she let the words hang in the air, watching Eli's face. His expression shifted. Something soft and hopeful flickering in his eyes. A family, he repeated. Clara felt her cheeks heat. It is just a thought. We do not have to decide anything now. I just wanted you to know that I hope. She was babbling. She knew she was babbling, but she could not seem to stop. Eli reached out and took her hand, silencing her. I want that too, he said. His voice was rough with emotion. A family. Children, all of it. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. I never thought I would have those things. I never thought I deserved them. But with you... He trailed off, unable to finish. Clara leaned against him, her heart singing. We can build something bigger, she said. A proper house, with room for children and guests and all the things we have been missing. We can make a life here, Eli. A real life. Eli pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. Yes, he said. Yes to all of it. They sat by the stream for a long time, dreaming of the future. And when they finally climbed back on their horses and continued toward home, Clara felt like she was riding toward everything she had ever wanted. The cabin was exactly as they had left it. Clara dismounted and stood for a moment, looking at the small structure that had become her sanctuary. It was humble, yes, but it was home, the first real home she had ever known. Eli came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Welcome home, Mrs. Thorne, he murmured in her ear. Clara leaned back against him, smiling. It is good to be home, she said. They settled back into their routines quickly. Clara tended the garden she had started, planting the seeds she had bought in town. Eli worked on expanding the cabin, adding a room that would serve as a nursery when the time came. The days passed in a blur of contentment. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, Clara would think about how close she had come to death, how she had walked into that blizzard expecting to die and had found life instead, found Eli instead. It seemed impossible, like something out of a fairy tale, and yet here she was, living proof that miracles could happen. One evening, about a month after their return, Clara felt a strange flutter in her stomach. She paused in her work, pressing a hand to her belly. What is wrong? Eli asked, immediately at her side. Clara looked up at him, her eyes wide. She swallowed hard. I think I might be pregnant. The world went still. Eli stared at her, his face blank with shock. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his features. A smile so bright and joyful that it took Clara's breath away. Pregnant, he repeated. You are pregnant. We are going to have a baby. Clara laughed, tears springing to her eyes. I think so. It is too early to be certain, but she did not get to finish the sentence. Eli swept her up in his arms, spinning her around, laughing with an abandon she had never heard from him before. A baby, he said again, setting her down gently. Our baby. Clara cupped his face in her hands. Our baby, she confirmed. Eli kissed her then, soft and reverent, like she was something precious and holy. I love you, he said against her lips. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. Clara smiled, her heart overflowing. I love you too, she said. Always and forever. They stood there in the doorway of their little cabin, wrapped in each other's arms, the sun setting behind the mountains and the future stretching bright before them. And Clara knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that everything she had suffered had been worth it. Every hardship, every fear, every moment of despair had led her here, to this man, to this life, to this perfect happiness. She had walked into a blizzard expecting to die. Instead, she had found everything she had ever wanted. 8 months later, in the heart of winter, Clara gave birth to a daughter. They named her Rose, for the flowers that would bloom in the spring. She had her father's pale blue eyes and her mother's auburn hair, and she was the most beautiful thing either of them had ever seen. Eli held her for the first time with trembling hands, tears streaming down his scarred face. "She is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Clara, exhausted but exhilarated, smiled up at him from the bed. "She is ours," she said. "A miracle." Eli sat down beside her, cradling Rose against his chest. "When I found you in that snow," he said, "I thought I was saving your life. I did not know you would save mine, too." Clara reached up and touched his face, tracing the scar she had come to love. "We saved each other," she said. "That is what love does." Rose made a small sound and both of them looked down at her, mesmerized. "Thank you," Eli said, "for walking into my life, for not giving up, for loving me when I did not think I was worth loving." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thank you for finding me," she said, "for saying I was yours, for making it true." Eli leaned down and kissed her, soft and sweet. "You will always be mine," he said, "and I will always be yours, no matter what happens. No matter how much time passes, forever." Clara smiled, her heart full to bursting with love and gratitude and hope. "Forever," she agreed. Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the mountains in white. Inside, a family huddled close, bound by love and faith and the knowledge that they had found their way home at last. And they all lived, as the best stories always promise, happily ever after. 5 years had passed since Clara had walked into that blizzard, and she could hardly recognize the life she had built. The cabin had grown into a proper house, with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen, and a porch where she could sit and watch the sunset. The garden flourished each summer, providing more than enough food to see them through the winters. The traplines kept them in furs and meat, and Eli had even started trading with the town, building relationships with merchants and neighbors who had once viewed him with suspicion. Rose was 5 now, all bright eyes and endless questions. She followed her father everywhere, learning to track animals and identify plants and do all the things a mountain child needed to know. She had a gentleness about her that reminded Clara of Eli, a kindness that seemed too big for such a small body. And she was not alone anymore. Thomas had come 2 years after Rose, a sturdy boy with his mother's determination and his father's quiet strength. At 3, he was already trying to keep up with his sister, toddling after her on unsteady legs, babbling words that only he understood. Clara watched them now from the porch, her hands resting on her swelling belly. Another child was on the way, due in the autumn. She had been afraid at first of growing their family so quickly, but Eli had taken her fears and turned them into hope. "Every child is a gift," he had said. "Every life is a miracle, and we have room enough in our hearts for as many miracles as we are given." He was right, as he so often was. Their hearts had only grown with each addition, expanding to hold more love than Clara had ever thought possible. "Mama! Mama, look!" Rose came running across the yard, something clutched in her small hands. She skidded to a stop at the foot of the porch, holding up her treasure for Clara to see. It was a bird's nest, abandoned but perfectly intact, woven from grass and twigs and bits of soft down. "Papa helped me find it," Rose said proudly. "He said the birds built it in the spring and left it when the babies grew up." Clara leaned down to examine the nest, marveling at the delicate craftsmanship. "It is beautiful," she said. "The birds worked very hard on this." Rose nodded seriously. "Papa said we can keep it. He said it is like our house, only smaller." Clara smiled, her heart swelling with love. "Your papa is very wise," she said. Eli appeared around the corner of the house, Thomas perched on his shoulders. The boy was laughing, his chubby hands gripping his father's hair. "Did she show you the nest?" Eli asked. She did. It is quite the find. Eli climbed the steps and sat down beside Clara, settling Thomas on his lap. Rose scrambled up to join them, squeezing between her parents. They sat together as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The mountains rose around them, eternal and unchanging. The wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. "This is perfect," Clara murmured. Eli reached over and took her hand. "No," he said. "Not perfect, but good. Very, very good." Clara turned to look at him, at this man who had pulled her from the snow and given her everything she had ever wanted. His face was still scarred, his eyes still haunted by shadows of the past, but he was hers, and she was his. "I love you," she said. Eli squeezed her hand. "I love you too," he replied. "More than yesterday, less than tomorrow." Rose looked up at them, her blue eyes curious. "Do you love me too?" she asked. "Of course we do," Clara said, pulling her close. "We love you more than anything in the whole world." "And me?" Thomas demanded. "And you," Eli confirmed, tickling the boy's belly until he shrieked with laughter. Clara watched her family, her heart overflowing. She thought about the frightened girl she had been, running through a blizzard, certain she was going to die. She thought about the broken man who had found her, who had thought he did not deserve love or happiness. They had been wrong, both of them. So very, very wrong. Love was not something you earned. It was not something you deserved. It was something you found, often in the most unexpected places. Clara had found it in the snow, in the arms of a scarred mountain man who had looked at her like she was the sun after a long winter. She had found her home, her family, her happy ending, and she would be grateful for it every day for the rest of her life. The night was quiet, the children asleep in their beds, the house settling into silence. Clara stood at the window of her bedroom, looking out at the stars. Eli came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Clara leaned back against him. "Everything," she said. "Nothing. The past, the future. How lucky we are." Eli pressed a kiss to her temple. "Lucky," he repeated. "I never believed in luck before. Not until you." Clara turned in his arms, looking up at his face. "Do you remember what you said to me?" she asked. "That first morning when I woke up in your cabin?" Eli's brow furrowed. "I said a lot of things that morning." "You said I was yours," Clara reminded him. "You said the storm had blocked the passes, and I was stuck here, and I was yours now." Eli smiled, that rare and precious smile that still made her heart flutter. "I remember," he said. "I was trying to be practical, to explain the situation." "Were you?" Clara teased. "Just practical." Eli's smile widened. "Maybe not just practical," he admitted. "Maybe I wanted it to be true. Even then, maybe I knew from the moment I found you that you were meant for me." Clara reached up and touched his face. "I was terrified of you," she confessed. "That first morning, you were so big and scarred and fierce. I thought you were going to hurt me." "I know," Eli said. "I saw it in your eyes, and I wanted nothing more than to take that fear away, to show you that not all men were like the one you had run from." Clara kissed him softly. "You did," she said. "You showed me that it was possible to be loved, to be safe, to be happy." She pulled back and met his eyes. "You saved me, Eli. In every way a person can be saved." Eli's eyes glistened in the starlight. "You saved me too," he said. "You gave me a reason to live again, a reason to hope, a reason to believe that the past did not have to define the future." They held each other for a long moment, two souls who had found each other against all odds. "I love you," Clara whispered. "I love you too," Eli replied. "More than yesterday, less than tomorrow." Clara smiled. "Forever?" she asked. Eli kissed her, soft and deep and full of promise. "Forever," he confirmed, and as they stood there in the starlight, wrapped in each other's arms, Clara knew that it was true. Whatever storms might come, whatever challenges they might face, they would face them together, because that was what love was. Not a fairy tale, not a dream, but a choice made again and again, through good times and bad. She had walked into a blizzard expecting to die. Instead, she had found the love of her life. And that, Clara thought, was the best kind of miracle there was. The fire crackled softly in the hearth. The children slept peacefully in their beds, and two people who had once been alone stood together, watching the stars, ready for whatever the future might bring. Their story was not over. It was only beginning. But one thing was certain, they would live it together, always, forever, happily ever after.